Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about a semi-controversial topic. We're going to compare the OP-1 Field, which cost $2,000, to Logic Pro, which is just a couple $100. Seems like one of them may be a better deal, but the question I want to ask is it really? Is there anything about the OP-1 Field which would make me lean towards buying it instead of running a full Logic Studio? Before we jump into that, don't forget, if you like this kind of content, talking about Logic, getting notified when we do live streams, and make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Also, we are doing our new membership program, which is for the nerds among us. I'm not going to lie, we have some really amazing conversations every week, and you'll be getting some additional content. Bonus content, of course. We're still doing all of our normal programming. And if you're interested in one-on-one lessons, then there's a link in the description for that as well. It's something we've done in the past and we're restarting it, so make sure you check that out. So the OP-1 Field, what's the deal? Who in their right mind would buy a $2,000 teeny little instrument, right? Well, that's what I want to talk about. I have been on the fence with this instrument in the past. I know how much it costs, but I know how much so many things cost. This is no different than buying, in some ways, a new microphone preamp that costs $1,500 for your studio. It's not for everybody. And yet, there are lots of studios that have amazing preamps and microphones that are justified and put to use over decades of time. What's the deal with this instrument then? I mean, what is it about it that would add or replace something like a Logic Pro Studio? That's what I was interested in. And when I got my hands on one, I was still somewhat skeptical at the beginning. And yet I feel like after spending a little time with this, there are a few things that have far outweighed everything else. And that's what I want to talk about today a little bit. So, what is it? First of all, my initial impressions. It's heavy. It's heavy for what it is. I'm sure that they just put some like lead weight in there to make it feel substantial. One of those mind tricks, like saying something costs $1.99 instead of $2. More people lean towards it costing $1 than $2, right? Okay, so it has a little bit of heft to it. It has a lot of what people talk about as limitations. Why can't it do this? Why can't it have more than 4 tracks? Why does it have 4 recorders? Why can you put one effect on things? All of that stuff is technically true. It does have some of those limitations, but I don't find myself thinking about them when using it. In fact, I always know if I really need to, I can use this in conjunction with Logic and enhance all of it with just many, many more effects and processing. In fact, I think too often we're in a situation where we assume we can just fix something later, and so maybe we don't give it the best performance in the first place and we think we'll just fix it later. Have you ever thought that maybe, just maybe, we have too much in our software these days? Logic has so much. I was just talking to one of you today in the comments about how Logic does so many things, not all of them amazingly. Some of them just good, some of them great, but many of them just good in comparison to other workstations, right? And so what is it, though, that we want with so much? What do we want with so much in our software? That's a great question. Is it good for our creativity? Maybe, maybe not. There's no guarantee of that for anything. But what is it about the OP-1 that I actually fell in love with from the first moment I started using it? One of those things is the mystery. It's like a lot of buttons on here don't do stuff. So I liked going in there and figuring out how to navigate through the menus, even when things aren't really labeled. You have to find a new language to speak with this thing. And then I started wanting to put effects on things. And each of those effects had all of these different screens. The cow I mean, it's just like the boxer, every little thing was so different. It did many of the same things that I'm already used to doing. I can probably recreate every single one of those effects in Logic, given the right amount of time and thinking it through with what everything does. I'm not saying it's not possible. What I'm saying is that I look at the screen and it's like going to a foreign country and listening to a language that I don't fully comprehend at the beginning, and then learning it and realizing that people have conversations just like we do, except they're different. Each language says things so differently, and the thought process to get there can really spark creativity in a way that speaking your own language doesn't. I learned this when I lived in the Czech Republic. I speak Czech relatively fluently for as much as I can living in Denver right this moment. And when I speak Czech, I think differently, I say things differently, and it's not a one-to-one translation. It's almost more like an emotion. I think the OP-1 field is like that for me. It helps me speak in a different way and think in a different way. And there's something about it that I've done since using it that I haven't done in Logic in a long time. And that is tweak knobs. It sounds so stupid and so easy. You can buy a controller, but a controller with Logic is still a lot of thought process. You have to go through and figure out how to assign things and get them to the right place. With this, there's nothing like that. You just load it up, you start tweaking, everything's color coded, and you can create some of the most amazing things. Half the time I don't even know what it's going to do. I just have to do it and figure out what it's doing. I love that. I love this pull to be creative in a way that I haven't felt with Logic in a long time. I still like creating in Logic. I can find what I need. I know exactly where everything is. I've gotten to the point where there are very few mysteries about Logic left, and I was missing that. And I love that even after endless tweaking on this new instrument, this OP-1 field, that I'm still finding things that I'm like, I don't know what that does, and I can't easily figure it out. And so I love that part of it. I love the limitations too. Coming from a place where Logic can do pretty much anything to having to do what I want using a set of rules. It's a really incredible place to be, and it's actually freeing more than it is limiting. Okay, is that it? Just like the knobs that I can tweak? Well, yes and no. There's so much more to this. I think the other thing I'll talk about is that we can compare the OP-1 field to Logic Pro and say, oh, $2,000 versus, a couple $100. Don't forget that Logic doesn't work all by itself. You have to have a computer, and you have to oftentimes have a good computer to use all of its features. I mean, some of them are silicon only at this point. And so, yes, you can get a Mac Mini M2 for, under $1,000, but all of a sudden we're creeping right up there. So maybe, with some extra bells and whistles, you spend $1,000 on a Mac Mini. And Logic, couple $100, and an audio interface, speakers, a microphone. All of that stuff comes in with the OP-1. You don't need any of them to use its basic functionality. Is it going to be better with a set of speakers or headphones or an external microphone? Probably, but this has all of that. You can record straight into the microphone, into the sampler, into the OP-1 field. You can record directly off the radio and do some sample drops from that. There are so many things you can do with this that, in spite of some of the more obvious limitations, this form factor, this portable form factor with everything in it, is actually much more powerful than you can even imagine, because you don't need all of the other stuff. On top of that, you can't do what a lot of us do, which is, oh, I need to look up something real quick while I'm doing this project. I wonder if, something's on TikTok or Facebook or wherever. It's like you get distracted. The computer does so many more things. It's true, but is more always better? And that's the answer that I was looking for. And after a lot of thought, I'm not giving up logic. But I do want to emulate what this instrument does for me. It's like I want to have more limitations. I want to set up more boundaries so that I can figure out how to create something without always having so many options. I want what the OP-1 gives me in terms of tweakability and creativity and new interfaces. And I wish Apple would see it that way. I wish Apple would give us something fresh and think outside the box and push us instead of just push us around a little bit. Is it worth it? Is this instrument worth it for $2,000? If you have $2,000 to spend on a new instrument, definitely. It's worth it. It's like buying a really fancy guitar for a guitar player, or it's like someone who's recording vocals in the studio at a very high level, getting a very expensive microphone and preamp. If you're someone who creates in the realm of sound, someone who does things with sound to make a soundscape, musically or not musically, if you're doing stuff for films or if you're doing things for video games or whatever, this is a must-have for your toolkit. And Teenage Engineering didn't pay me to say that. This is my own opinion. This is something that I want on everything I do. A little bit on everything I do. That's my endorsement.